Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Willett Hosfeld. I'm the Certification Programs Manager at ESA, and I will be your host for our webinar this afternoon. Thanks again for joining us for the second webinar in the Design Thinking webinar series in conjunction with the Antlion Pit competition. Today's presentation will focus on the Ideate stage, and the presentation will run about 45 minutes with approximately 10 minutes at the end for questions. During today's sessions, we'll like to make sure you're all getting the most out of the participating in this online course. So all attendees are muted on entry of the call. And on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll notice a dialog box with several options. Today, you'll use the question box, which will allow you to post questions or concerns during the session. We'll do our best to answer those as we go along. Otherwise, we might hold some of them for the end. So we do encourage the use of this tool during the presentation, and the questions will be filtered to the speaker at the end, as I just mentioned. If during the session you're having any technical problems, feel free to type it out in the questions box, and we'll be happy to assist you. Your presenters today will be Dr. Marianne Lane, research scientist and lecturer within the Department of Entomology at the University of Illinois, and Dr. Amy Wissa, assistant professor in the Department of Mechanical Science and Engineering at the University of Illinois. As I turn this over to Drs. Lane and Wissa, just a reminder that we are recording this webinar so that we can post it to the ESA website for viewing after we are done with today's live session. So with that, Drs. Lane and Wissa, I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Willett. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. What do I do now? There we go. Show my screen. Show my screen. Here we go. So this is us. I'm Em. And Amy. I'm Amy. And we'll just share our screen with you. Hopefully that will do it. Yep. All right. So this is the second part of our webinar series. We have been discussing the design process a little bit already in the first webinar, and that should be available to you. So even if you missed it, no big deal. So we're trying to give you tools that you may not have used before in coming up with better designs that you could maybe submit to the Antlion Pit competition. But I would argue that this way of thinking is also very helpful in other projects that you may have. So today we're going to focus on Ideate. As a reminder, this is the design thinking process that we are using, and we discussed already empathize and the defining stage. And today we're going to talk about the ideation stage. What that means is here. So this is the close-up. This means how do you actually generate a range of creative ideas. It doesn't necessarily have to be crazy, but just like have a pool of ideas that you can decide on pursuing. And it might not always be the first idea that you came up with that is the best one. So we need to come up with some tools to get you to those creative ideas. So what is ideation? Ideation is the creative process of generating and then developing and communicating new ideas. So it's not just in your head. You have to share it with your team, or maybe just on a notepad, and keep coming back to it and develop it and start using those ideas. So. In the 19th century, or before that, it was thought that creativity couldn't be taught. There were just some people that were really creative, and other people just weren't, and they would just they would have to be resigned to just enjoying what other people created. We now know that an individual's creativity skills can be improved through practice, and it really doesn't matter at what point you start. Old people like me, I can become more creative, and there's certain tools to help that. Young people like Amy can also do it, and they actually might in her education, she has been told that she can become more creative. So. So that's what we want to help you with today, to come up with these creativity, find your own creativity. So what is the goal of ideation then? You want to come up with some, generate some radical design alternatives. So again, not the first idea that you come up with. You want to go, what we call, go wide in concepts and outcomes. You want to have like a flare, many flares of ideas, not just one that you focus on because it's the obvious one and you think it's going to be the most successful one when you first start. We want you to have lots of ideas. So that you have a wide solution space. There's a large quantity of ideas that you then will start refining, and a broad diversity of ideas. And especially if you're working in teams, this is a really great thing because many people from your team will come up with different ideas. Again, broadening that diversity of ideas. So let's see how that works. We've come up with a couple of exercises during this webinar that we'll try out. Of course, in a classroom setting where we do this too, this is even more fun, but we'll try it here too in the webinar. So get a pen and paper, if you have it there, just a pencil, paper. And next we'll give you a task that you have to accomplish in a very short time, so get ready. And then we will ask you at the end how well you did. Okay, and then you can put that in through the tool here.
A couple of seconds to situate it before we.
All right, we'll give you a couple more seconds to get a pen and paper, or just a pen, just write on your hand or something like that,
Or on the wall.
or on the wall, and hopefully everybody's ready. So here we go. We want you to come up with opposites for these 4 words, and starting now. Oh,
As many opposites as you can.
As many opposites as you can. And we're going to just count. There we go. 20. Yeah, 20 seconds. All right. So, Willett, can you maybe put up the first prompt for students where they can put in how many? What is that?
Sorry, I just launched it. Sorry.
Okay. So, can you? So, how is it pretty obvious how they put that in? It's not obvious.
So looks like we're almost everybody has voted at this point, and looks like most people found more than 8. About 43% of people on the call found more than 8 opposites.
Is that good?
Per word or for each word? Well, it's okay. We'll talk about that afterwards.
Well, we'll talk about that after. It really we're trying to get you to get out of your comfort zone. It probably was super easy to get the first 4, and then to get the next 4 and beyond that is a lot harder. And but having a time constraint makes you think about more stuff. So that is one of the things you'll see coming back, the forcing you to think beyond the first 4 obvious ones to get to that 8.
Yeah, you'll see that the more creative opposites, like if you thought night, I'm sure the first one that came to mind was day or light. But then beyond that, it was really hard. And if you push yourself beyond those first 2, those will be then the more creative opposites or the most non-obvious ones. And that's why it's really important to just not stop there and then.
Okay, so that's what this slide will also say. You want to get from defining a problem that you may have established, you want to focus on for, say, the land-based competition or any kind of design, and you want to explore the solution space that you have to work with, and that's where ideation comes in. You do then ideation to leverage harness the collective perspective and the strengths of your team, for instance, if you're working together to get, like, what is everybody thinking that will give us the best solution, and that may be very different from what your individual one. And again, go beyond obvious solutions, and in that way drive innovation. So one of the most common ideation tools is brainstorming, and it is defined in the dictionary as sudden inspiration and a bright idea, severe outburst of excitement, or a sudden mental aberration. So all of a sudden, like that light bulb goes off, and so that's what we want to give you some tools to help you with that brainstorming, or actually give you some better tools than just brainstorming that you are most familiar with probably. Again, usually it is we give a limited segment of time is involved, and that you should be in a space or in a situation where you can share your brainstorming ideas without any judgment. Never think, oh, my idea is just stupid, because it doesn't matter, because you already gave all the obvious ones, the obvious solutions. Now you want to come to the more creative ones, and those are definitely not stupid. You want to turn down in your brain the evaluative part, like, oh, again, I don't think this is a good idea. You want to amp up the generative part, the generation of ideas. So, not very good with animations. Let me just do this. So, best practices for when you're brainstorming as a team, which I hope you're working in teams, because as you will see with this brainstorming or with this ideation stage, teams make all the difference. So do listen to each other, don't judge, express your ideas, and wild ideas are actually encouraged, but there has to be a little bit of structure. So I think having a facilitator is a good idea, so only one person speaks at the same time. Explains their ideas. What did they mean by this one idea that they had, and make sure that there's a facilitator that stops maybe the judging part or the saying, well, I don't think that's a good idea. And be respectful. So again, don't take things personally. Once you get past the obvious solution space or the obvious ideas, everybody's gonna come up with some pretty crazy things that in the end might actually be really useful. Don't ever block your teammates. Even if you don't understand what they're saying the first time, maybe you could ask for clarification, but their ideas are just as valuable as yours, and they definitely don't make your teammates feel dumb, of course. So, and also, it's always good to be visual. It doesn't just have to, you don't have to just write a sentence, my solution or my idea is. Be visual, maybe find a picture of what you mean, or draw a picture of what you mean. Build on others' ideas. We'll give you some tools for that too, like one idea might not quite be perfect, but maybe if you add to it would be great. Quantity is really important, like as you already saw in that first exercise. When you get to those ones that were hard, those ideas hard to get to, those are the really interesting ones. But try to stay focused on topic, and I think that's where the facilitator would really help. But there's many challenges also, not many, there's some challenges when you're doing brainstorming. Our brains actually don't really work like that oftentimes. We love pattern recognition systems, and our brains are pattern recognition systems, and some people are better than other people in this way, and maybe it's also the time of day or what kind of mood you're in, so be aware of that. So try to work around that or force it a little bit more. And so we react to these patterns based on past experiences. We always bring our own life experience to the brainstorming exercise, what we have experienced, in what country we grew up in, what our cultural background is, if we, how big our families are, those kinds of things. If we we're engineers or biologists. So be aware of that. So we recognize objects and situations very quickly, especially the ones that we're familiar with. And I'm actually reading a book right now that certain objects we actually might not recognize because we don't expect them. So then we actually might be staring it right in the face, but we don't. We may not see that. Again, be aware of that. And so try to get out of those patterns for the really interesting ideas. So brainstorming is then becoming more of a lateral thinking process that we hope to encourage, where you try to get out of that the thinking pattern that our brain is most familiar with. So we have some tips here. Then so first you see what's right in front of us, but then go beyond the trees and maybe even go over the mountain. So the first one, the beyond the trees, I think that's kind of what we usually do when we think we're doing brainstorming. We really want to push you over even further and go over the mountains. So so you go for low-hanging fruit first, and then maybe add some constraints or remove constraints. So what if this this thing that I'm designing actually also has to work underwater? That would add constraints, or how would a user use that underwater? And is that, or go the opposite direction, remove constraints. And then do go for moonshot ideas. I think even wild and absurd ones. For instance, the global challenges that ESA has on their website, that was created at a brainstorming session of the governing board and the program committee and things like that, where we did a lot of brainstorming for a couple of days, and those are the grand challenges that we've come up with and that we are happy about and that we're working on, and I think they're really having an impact. So that's just one example of the moonshot ideas. So we have one more exercise. Oh no, we have two more exercises, but here's another one. Again, get a pen and paper. So what we'll ask you to do next is you will again be asked to write down some ideas. We've give you one prompt, you write some ideas, then we'll give you another prompt and you write some ideas. And then at the end, we will again have one of those surveys that will run where you write down the difference between the two prompts that you had. So if you're ready, again, you have 15 seconds to do each of these. This is, think of as many silver things as you can and write them down on a piece of paper. All right, so you have you've written down a whole bunch of things that are silver. Next, write down silver things that you can find in your kitchen. Okay, so Willard, for your, can you put up prompt number 2? Thank you.
Yep.
Why do we not see this?
Because it only shows up there.
Okay.
All right, so we've had just over half the people vote, so just give it another couple seconds here.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so it looks like 75% of attendees sparked more ideas in step 1, and 25% sparked more ideas in step 2.
Is that okay? That's maybe for some, yeah, for some people it's actually by adding the constraint of only being able to look in the kitchen. It's much easier than if you all of a sudden give this really broad thing. So for some, again, these constraints that you put on yourself might help or they might hinder. So you also might want to do both. So that's kind of what this exercise was trying to make clear, what we mean by constraint when you're trying to do ideation. Okay, we're now really getting into some of the tools that you can use to help your brainstorming, and Amy will run that show. Hold on, switching.
All right, how's everybody doing? So thus far, what you've learned, like what we've talked about, is that, you know, we finished the define and empathy stage, and then now to go from the problem to the solution, we told you that you ideate, you know, and M told you that the most common tool for ideation that we're all familiar with is brainstorming. Now, I want to tell you something. I hate brainstorming. I really do. I rather prefer something called bodystorming, and the reason why is play this game. I'm imagining something in my head. Can you tell what it is? Probably not. I would be very impressed if you can. And that's the problem with brainstorming. You have ideas in your head, and they might look a certain way. They might feel a certain way. You might have certain imagination of what they are. But your teammates, whoever you're trying to convey that idea to, even if you're using words, they might not get it. It's really abstract. It's not tangible. So over the last decade, people have been working really hard to shift things to give you tools for practical brainstorming that's more tangible. And I had one professor that have called this bodystorming, and I've been in love with this. So you have to use all your body, not just your head, not just your brain. It's bodystorming. So there's a lot of tools that to improve brainstorming and ideation, and there's websites at the end of the slide. I just want to show you 4 of them that I think they're really easy, very practical. You can do them super simple. Also, some of them are individual, and some of them are group-based. So if the idea is completely yours and you're working alone, there's some tools for you. And if the ideas are within a team, then there are some tools for you. All right, mind map. Mind map is a way to map out your ideas. It starts with the central idea, the main idea, the problem you want to solve, or the product you want to create in the center. And out of there comes branches, or the main themes. And then out of the branches come up twigs, or there may be ways of implementing those themes. And you can create a mind map for everything. If you go online and Google mind map, you'll see there's a mind map for planning a birthday party. There's a mind map for time management. This is an example of a mind map for a product launch. So, okay, I have to launch a product. Well, what's the first thing? First of all, the product has to be ready. I have to think about how am I going to promote the product? Who are my stakeholders? What are the key performance indicators that I have to, that's KPI, key performance indicators that I have to consider, right? On the right, there is a mind map about how our building reduce carbon dioxide emissions. And, you know, at first you say, okay, well, we have to think about the grass. Well, then you think about, okay, what are the things that cause carbon dioxide emissions, or what are the things that can help with carbon dioxide emissions? So you have grass, water, window, inner, external, the garden, you know, all these things, and these are branches. And out of those branches come little twigs, right? So what about water? Okay, collection, tank, sprinklers, right? And then you can think about maybe the hours of operation of each. And you can go as many levels as you want. But I think it's really important to have the central idea, branches, and twigs. You can go from the twigs, you can go to, I guess, you can call them sub-twigs or whatever. And the idea is that when you look at the mind map, you spend time. Let's say you spend an hour or 2, and this could be done individually or with a team. After you've done this, you can actually look at this picture and see what are some of the important things that you have to implement or think about. What are some of the ideas? Because you can then go under collection. After collection, you can take this even further and think about what are the different ways of collecting. Maybe collecting things from the roof, collecting things from the bottom of the water from the bottom of the building after it rains, or from the roof after it rains, or maybe collecting and purifying maybe like water and reuse it. So if you do a good job with the mind map and you spend a lot of effort, and it should be a painful process, I really urge you, if you stop and you have not worked hard, then you have not worked hard enough. Like, it has to be pain. It has to be like a lot of power goes into this. It's not a picture that you draw and you move on. But if you do it right, you get a chance to look at that mind map and see, okay, all right, these are the things I need to tackle. These are some of the problem areas. These are some of the areas of opportunities. These are some of the ideas that I can implement now. Those are the ones that I can, you know, defer for later. So mind map, another tool of mapping out the ideas and forcing you to go beyond the low-hanging fruits, okay? Remember, around the trees, above the mountain. Another tool is, and this is my favorite, is reverse brainstorming, because I think it's really funny and it breaks down the, you know, all the pattern thinking. It helps us break down some of the obvious solutions. For example, you can ask yourself, how can hospitals increase the number of infections? And you come up with a bunch of ideas, and then the opposite of those would be the answer to how can this hospital that's suffering, let's say, from a higher infection rate improve you know, patient health. So reverse brainstorming is used to improve an existing product, and instead of asking how to make the product or service better, you ask how to make it worse. So a manager of a health clinic might ask, how can we make the patient more dissatisfied? And then if you come up with those answers, maybe like 10 or 20 answers of how to make the patient dissatisfied, the opposite of those would help patient satisfaction. How can a hospital increase the rate of infections? Write them down, and then the opposite will be, and then see what currently the hospital does, and if they're not doing a good enough job, then they can improve those. Okay. A tool that's really useful, and I wish we were in the same room to do this together. This is a team exercise. It's called the round robin. And it's basically, you've all identified a problem, right? We've all finished the define stage. So we have a problem that's already defined. And we sit in a table, and then a facilitator, and the facilitator is really key for this tool. You say, okay, everybody on the table, write down their idea on an index card. So how might we design a fitness app? Okay? Then everybody on the table writes down their idea on an index card. And then after that, again, it's really important to be specific. So a fitness app is very specific. It's also important to give people a time constraint. Like, don't give them 20 minutes to come up with an idea of how might we design a better fitness app, right? So maybe let's say give everybody 5 minutes or something. They write their idea. And then after that, you take the Post-it notes or the index card, pass it to the right. The person to your right has to come up with a criticism of your idea. And then you pass it again. Then you pass it to the person to your left. And that person to the left has to come up with a way to resolve that criticism. And you keep doing this over and over again until the ideas are better. Another version of this round robin is now no criticisms are allowed. And every time you pass it to the right, the person that gets the index card has to make the idea better. For example, I can say, I would like to design the app to work both on the cell phone and on a watch or wearable. And then you take that to the next person, and the person, okay, and the wearable device have to give you like encouraging incentive messages when you reach milestones. And then you reach that, send that to the person after that. Oh, and every how many workouts this has to happen. And you keep going back and forth until you have a really cool each idea then now is developed. Then after a couple iterations or many iterations, right, you'll then have a bunch of ideas that are really strong, or maybe ideas that look the same will be able to be combined, and so on and so forth. So the round robin, the pros for that, excuse me, the pros for that is that it really uses the brain power of everybody in the room. And then if you have somebody that's in your team that's very outspoken and they believe their ideas are the best thing, and maybe somebody in the room that's more conservative and they don't speak as much, all their ideas become equal. because then, you know, you're using pen and paper. Everybody gets to write their ideas. Everybody's ideas gets to be improved on. No ideas get tossed out. And at the end, all ideas are better. So to me, if you're working in a team, this is such a cool tool. And you can do it either or. Either the first way where every time you pass it, you get a criticism, and you pass it the other way, and the criticism is resolved. Or you get it where everybody has to just build on, and there are no criticisms for the first round, and then you repeat again with the criticisms if you want, or the critique. I like the word critique better than criticism. So let's just use critique from now on. All right. The last tool I want to show you for brainstorming is called forced connection or random objects. This is the most fun. The way this works is we pick, and the reason why you would do this, and I want to back up so I'm not just showing you a bunch of tools that are unrelated. The mind map, what it does is it helps you get your ideas in a visual way so you can see all the possible options. Reverse brainstorming, it's really good for breaking you out of patterns because you're thinking about the opposite, and by default it's taking you out of those patterns. The round robin is a really good way to facilitate brainstorming with a team. It equates, you know, people that are outspoken, people that are introverts. So it's really good to just build on the collective power of the team. Forced connections is a really good tool to get you out of being stuck. If you feel like yourself getting very stuck like you keep coming to the same idea, or you can't come out of those ideas, or everything that you come up seems traditional, conventional, not exciting. The forced connection and random objects tool is really cool if you use it within moderation. Like, don't go too crazy with that tool, because otherwise you can go on tangents. But how it works is the following. You pick a random item, or somebody picks it for you. So we have an exercise where I'm going to pick the random item for you. And then for that random item, you write down a lot of attributes and associations that you can think of. So if I say car, what kind of attributes do you come up with? What kind of associations you can come up with? And then the third step is to force a connection. Sorry, excuse me. Force the connection between the attributes you've made and the product or the problem you're working on. So let's do an example, because that's the best way I can show you this. So get a paper and pen, and let's do this. All right, give you a couple seconds to get situated. All right. So the random object, I picked it for you, but when you're doing the ideation, you can pick it for yourself. But the random object is glasses, okay? So take, let's say, some time now to just write down on a piece of paper all the attributes you can think for glasses. I'm going to give you 60 seconds. Write all the attributes that you can think of for glasses. Again, try to go beyond the obvious. Try to push hard on what attributes you think of glasses. Okay. Okay. All right, 5 more seconds. Okay. All right, now I'm going to reset the clock again, and now take another 60 seconds to create as many connections between the attributes that you've come with glasses to the problem that I picked for this exercise is how might we design a fitness app? So inspired by the attributes you listed for glasses. So for example, I can give you one example just to explain to you what I mean. Maybe some of you came up with that glasses are fragile or easy to break, okay? So now the question is say, all right, how can we make a fitness app for people who are maybe not as healthy or suffer some, are recovering from some kind of health problem. Does that make sense? So now get 60 seconds to try to create as many of those forced connections to answer the question is, how might we design a fitness app? Okay? All right, here's another 60 seconds. All right. So now, well, can you please put up the third prompt?
Yep. All right, we're approaching half of the people having voted, so just give it another little bit here.
Well, would it be possible for the participants to actually share some of their ideas?
Yep, anybody who wants to do that could do it either via the questions functionality, or if you just raise your hand, hit that little raise hand button on the right-hand control panel, I'm happy to unmute lines. But it looks like with 63% of people having responded to the poll, that 60% found 3 to 5 connections and 40% found more than 5.
Nice. Okay, they're very creative people in this audience. All right. So yeah, so it would be great if you can just type the connections you made in the chat box, because it would be interesting to talk about them during the question and answer session. So, well, what's the point of this? Because this sounds very forced, just as the title, suggests, forced connections. It made you think about, if I think of fitness app, going back to the example that I gave, the fragile, glasses are fragile, so let's make a fitness app for people who are, maybe not as healthy or recovering from sickness or, or for rehab. When I say fitness app, the first thing that comes to mind are not those people. It's, you're probably thinking about people who already work out. You're thinking about people who might be running all the time. You might be thinking people that are trying to lose weight, or people that are trying to, gain muscle, You're not really thinking about a whole people that are sick or people that are doing fitness for rehab. So that just creates an opportunity that you didn't think about. So that's why, what's the power of this forced connection? There was no way your brain would have went there, maybe, unless it's a personal experience for you. But there's no way for somebody who's never been through this experience of being maybe going through rehab or recovering from some health issue and trying to be, fitness app, using a fitness app for that was something that they needed personally. Your brain might have not went there naturally. So then that increased by having two different things, and the more random they are or the more unrelated they are, the better that space becomes, the wider the space that you can cast. You have to be careful, because if you do this oftentimes, you might find yourself, maybe coming up with ideas that are really not needed or really on a tangent. But if you do this maybe 1 or 2 times during your ideation process, you might find cool ideas over the mountains that are coming up that were not originally part of your initial thought process. I want to point your attention to the Interaction Design Foundation website. They have a lot of really cool tools and worksheets about some of those tools and even more things. So it's a really cool website about design and design thinking. All right. Now, if you are like me, most of the ideas that come out of your brain, even if through all these tools, might not be very strong or maybe not feasible, which is okay. That's the hope. You need to have a bunch of ideas, right? The next stage in the ideation process is you've generated ideas. Now it's time to make them stronger, refine them, evaluate them, and improve them. And there's 3 tools that I want to show you that after you've come up with, let's say, 10 ideas through a brainstorming session, or 20 ideas through a brainstorming or a bodystorming session, how can you make those ideas stronger? And that's called the refine, evaluate, and improve. And the objective of this stage of the ideation is not to come up with the solution. It's just to come up with a smaller group of solutions that might be more feasible, that might be stronger, and to remove ideas that are completely not feasible. Like if you have an idea that relies heavily on something that has not been developed technologically, or something that's completely, a material that's not existing right now, like you need vibranium from Wakanda or something. Not a good idea.
What?
You have to remove it from the list, and that's the point of the REI, is to not come up with the single idea, but to come up with fewer ideas. Maybe if you started with 10 out of the brainstorming or bodystorming sessions, now maybe narrow them down to 3, 4, or 5 ideas that are really good. And now you pick those ideas, and then you based on those REIs, you can now take those 3 or 4 ideas and then make them really strong. The first way of making them strong is through something called the SWOT method, which it has strengths, weaknesses, opportunity, and threats. So you look at the idea, and any idea you have from the brainstorming session, you say, okay, what are the strengths of this idea? What are the weaknesses of those ideas? What are the opportunities and what are the threats? And students ask me all the time in class, what is the difference between a strength and an opportunity, or a weakness and a threat? And strengths and weaknesses are internal to the idea. Like the idea has some strengths and has some weaknesses. Opportunity and threats are external, meaning, for example, let's say we have created the fitness app. Maybe the strength of the fitness app that everybody can access it. Maybe a weakness that it doesn't work if you don't have Wi-Fi. I'm making stuff up. These are now internal to the app, right? Opportunities are maybe, oh, this is the only app that can, be installed both on your phone and in your watch. So then that's an opportunity externally, right? There's nothing else like it outside, so that's an opportunity. Or a threat, for example, that there's hundreds of apps out there, so how are you going to be different? So strengths and weaknesses are internal, opportunity and threats are external. I hope that helps a little bit, and feel free to ask questions about this in the time we have left when we're done. Another tool to make your ideas stronger is the SCAMPER method, and that's the substitute, combine, adapt, modify, put to other uses, eliminate, rearrange method, or SCAMPER method. And it's basically taking one idea and seeing, can you make it stronger by substituting, by combining different components, by adapting something from a different idea, modifying, removing a constraint, rearranging. So it's a SCAMPER method. A third tool to make your idea stronger is the Post-it notes method. And you can use the Post-it notes to vote or to select top ideas. So let's say you leave the brain or bodystorming session with 10 ideas. How do you decide which ones are the most feasible and things like that? You could use the Post-it notes. So every individual in the team gets like a blue Post-it, a yellow Post-it, and a red Post-it. They can use blue Post-it once to say this is the top idea. They can maybe use the yellow Post-it a couple times to say these are good ideas, or you can use a red Post-it to say this is, the least desirable, least practical idea. And then you guys vote, and then the Post-it that has the most blue and yellow, the idea that has the most blue and yellow Post-its would win, and it would take it to the next step, next phase of ideation, which is the REI. You can also use the Post-its to dig deeper or to make the idea stronger. For example, you say, oh, you can use a yellow Post-it to say, oh, I know how to make this idea happen. I know how to build this. I know how to implement this. and then you give it a yellow post-it that says, how would you build this or how would you create this? You can also use a red post-it to say, have you thought about this? This is actually might be a problem. So a critique to the idea. Or you can think about a blue, or you can add a post-it. You say, I know how to make this better. How about if we also add this? So again, you can use this post-it note to select, to winnow down to a couple ideas that are feasible, most liked by your team. And then you can use post-its again for the most feasible ideas to build on those ideas and make them better. So this is the end of what I want to share with you. And then
you can do the elements.
Okay. So what we've covered in the last two webinars, right, is the empathy and define. We told you how to understand your user, how to know what they need, and then how to come up now with a problem and define it well. And then to go from definition to the solution space, which is the prototyping on the yellow part, you have to come up with a bunch of ideas. And we showed you that the ideation stage has two phases. The first phase is generating the ideas. And we showed you a couple tools to turn brainstorming that's hard into bodystorming that's more tangible. And then we showed you also a couple tools to make, after you've generated the ideas, and how to make them stronger. So that was what today was about, how to generate ideas and how to make ideas that you generated stronger. Next time, we're going to focus on prototyping and how do you actually visualize some of your ideas to assess them and prototype them. And that will be next time, which will be,
I think, in 10 days, on a Tuesday, I think.
Yeah, in 10 days, something like that. Anyways, that is the end of this webinar, and we have about 14 minutes for questions.
Yes. So let's see what we got. So some of the feedback we got to the ideas, that final poll question were, seeing your calories daily, droppable, lightweight, aerodynamic, and the other one was just somebody dropping off the call. So just those two pieces. So if anybody has any questions or any comments they want to bring up, feel free to plug them into the questions box or raise your hand. And actually, with not too many people online, I can just unmute everybody.
Is the camera on first?
Right, so if anybody has questions, all your lines are unmuted unless you've muted your phone yourself. So feel free to share any questions or feedback you might have.
Anybody has questions?
All right.
So what was one of some of the favorite brainstorming tools? Which tools did you like the most? Which tools did you not like at all? Which ones did you not understand again, or?
What do you want to try?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I don't want to get in trouble right now. I think it's like...
We do have a question from Brian Lovett, which was, which method do you turn to most often?
Okay.
I think in the classroom, we most often do the post-it ones. The post-it one. Yeah. One of those flexible classrooms that's kind of nice with like some wall space. That one is good. We really encourage our teams, like outside of the classroom, to do some of the other ones. When you have a space with a table and some coffee and just share ideas that way. I've also used the opposites ones where you really come up with some really strange ideas sometimes.
In a design class that I teach, we actually force everybody to use the mind maps, and I think that works really well, especially if you have a product that has different components. So if you're trying to, let's say, design a robot or a walker, we force them to use the mind map, because then they can say, okay, I want to design a walker that can traverse, let's say, this weird terrain. And then they have to think about the gears and the wheels and the body and the you know, and the controller. So it's when you have a product or an idea that has different components, a mind map is really helpful to make sure that you kind of plan out everything.
Thanks for that answer. So any other questions we might have from anybody on the line?
I also want to encourage you to kind of write down how you are ideating and how you are coming up with these ideas. I think might, when you're presenting for the antlion pit competition, it might be a good idea to show them that, you know, I thought of all these other things too, but we decided for and against it. So you can kind of show them, like, this is not just the one idea we had, this is just the most feasible one, or the one that we were most excited about, or something like that. So, you know, take notes, because this is just, you know, just like when you're doing experiments, write down, what's it called? A journal about it, or something like that. So. All right. Well, thanks, everybody.
Yeah. All right. So if we don't have any other questions, then we will just going to bring up quickly the my screen and for whatever reason I can't get it to work. So in any event, the screen I was going to bring up is just a reminder for the next webinar in this series, which is webinar number 3, prototyping and testing stages. That'll be on Tuesday, May 28th from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern. And you can go to the ESA website to view the webinar archives, which will include the first webinar in this series, as well as after today we'll post this one if you want to go back and watch anything again. Otherwise, thanks very much to everybody for attending, and look forward to seeing you in just about 2 weeks.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.